Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. We're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. With me on the show today, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. General Boykin was one of the original members of the U.S. Army's Delta Force. He was privileged to ultimately command these elite warriors in combat operations, and then went on to command all the Army's Green Berets, as well as the Special Warfare Center and School. In his 36 years in the Army, General Boykin also served a tour with the CIA. He has participated in clandestine operations around the world and served his last 4 years in the Army as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Today, he's an ordained minister with a passion for spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ and encouraging Christians to become warriors in God's kingdom. Since June of 2012, Jerry has been serving as the Executive Vice President of the Family Research Council. He also occupies the Wheat Chair for Leadership Studies at Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia. General, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It's a delight to be with you.
Thank you, sir. Well, you are one impressive and intimidating gentleman. You've had tremendous experience in the military. And so it's my honor, my privilege to just have this time with you and hear from you because you're so interesting. I really want my audience to get to hear who you are, what you're about, what you've done, and what you're doing. So I want to start with the what you've done part first. And tell us about Delta Force. Did you start Delta Force?
No.
You didn't start it.
Delta Force started in 1978, actually in February or November of 77, but it actually started in 78. And it was a long process to get enough people through the very rigorous assessment and selection program just to be on one of the teams. Wow. And then you had an attrition rate that ran about 82%.
Oh my gosh.
So you can see the problem, but we finally got enough to get going, and we started in the spring of 78. We started in the spring, and we were declared combat ready that fall. Now, that said, we had a lot to learn. And the reason is there were no playbooks for what we were doing. The U.S. military had never thought about the whole idea that we might have to rescue hostages. We might have to take down airplanes that have hostages on them and so forth. Or that we might have to go in behind, the lines, so to speak, and really do all kinds of dastardly deeds that all of us had seen in movies, but never thought that we would ever see one for real. So yes, the Delta Force is real, and at this point, I think you would find very few Americans that don't know what it's about and that it is real. What they don't know are the things that it's done. Only a few of those have actually been publicized, but it's been running clandestine operations, and which is the way we protect our own people, by the way, is not to let the public know, because I've actually had 2 MP cars sitting out in front of my house when I was on Fort Bragg the last time. They sit at my house all night, because we had threats against me, because it was exposed that I was commander of the operation that got Pablo Escobar, that actually killed Pablo Escobar several years ago. I didn't kill him, and I'm not saying that, but we were there with them, and we set him up to be able to take care of him, and as a result of that, there was an author that wrote about Killing Pablo was the name of the book. And when that started, then the threats started. When he released my name, the threats started. And my wife and I, we are people of faith, and we kind of took the attitude that, well, the Lord is in this, and He'll take care of us. And if it's His will, as my wife said, make sure they get both of us, and we'll go together. She honestly said that, but then she paused, and she said, now, go over there to your brother's gun shop and get me another pistol. And I did. And she has more guns than I can tell you about right now.
Tough lady.
But she's a sporting person too.
Well, you're reiterating that Delta Force is real because there's a question about it. And I will read this to you. When you try to look it up, and we live in an age of great transparency and availability of information. Right. So to have a force under the JSOC operating and not know everything about it, which, to your point, that has to happen for safety and security of the operation, success of the operations and safety of the members in it. But that's surprising to us now because we think that we should have access to all this information. But when you look it up, it says, the force resides under the operational control of the Joint Special Operations Command, but is administered by the Army Special Operations Command. The unit's existence has never been confirmed by the U.S. government. All public knowledge of it comes from its former members. Why is that?
In my 36 years, I never saw anything that was quite as contradictory as what you just read. And the reason is because the Delta Force has to recruit people in the military. Now, what do you tell them they're being recruited for? For the band? For the marching band? No, I mean, they are going to do something that is totally different, that is unique. Nobody else does it in the Army. And so you have to put out bulletins there, Delta Force recruiting, see the recruiter at such and such a place. So we're announcing it all over the installations, but then they want to play this game. It's just foolishness. They want to play this game that basically is saying, well, we don't acknowledge their existence. What do you mean you don't acknowledge it? This is one of my pet peeves with this whole approach here. Yes, if you want people, you've got to tell them what you're asking them to do, because likely they're not going to make it. And they need to know that this is rigorous, and it's the Delta Force, and once you get in it, you will find out what it does. But it has to be that way. So it has been acknowledged, I mean, people have talked about it. Retired generals like me have talked about the Delta Force. I have spoken about my personal testimony of being shot a couple of times in the Delta Force, and I held back nothing that wasn't classified. I held back the fact that this was a Delta Force operation, and here's what we did, and our mission was this. And so I think that there's a little bit of foolishness involved in that, and what you read there has been probably said exactly that for the last 40 years. Yeah.
What were you thinking? Why did you join?
Yeah, I was an instructor in the Ranger camp in Florida, in the Panhandle of Florida, and I got a call from this guy in the headquarters personnel office, and he said, Captain Boykin, I'm going to ask you to volunteer for a new unit that's being formed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I'm going to send you through a 30-day assessment and selection, and it will be the toughest thing you've ever done. You need to be in top physical condition, and if you make it, we'll ask you to volunteer for assignment into this unit. Now, the if you make it kind of got my attention, because I'd been through Ranger School and Airborne, and he's saying, if you make it. Well, that was a challenge. I was young. I was 28 years old. And that was a challenge. And may I just for a second. One of the issues with men in this country today is they're not being challenged. They're not being challenged, and they're not able to prove themselves. And they have listened to this society that tells them that if they get stressed, they pull out their little stress card. Now, you're nodding your head, but I want you to understand that's exactly what we're doing in basic training today. Is, you know how you've seen the movies where the old drill instructor just, give them a boot in the seat? Our young men and women now, if they get stressed, all they have to do is hold up their card.
You're talking about a literal card.
Literal card. They have a stress card.
You're kidding.
I wish I was.
That's terrible. So they pull out a card that says, I'm feeling anxious, this is stressing me out. Boot camp.
Right.
That's absurd.
And then you have to pull them out of training, give them time to settle down, and then you can put them back in.
Wow. I did not know that. Thank you for clarifying. That's insane.
My dad, which is, he's my mentor and he's dead now, but he was wounded on D-Day. Do you think the Germans were looking for stress cards that they could use to stop the overflow of what was happening on the beach that they were supposed to be controlling? The reality is that we have made ourselves such poor examples of men and warriors that this Army has got to take a serious look at itself, and we can talk about this later, but a serious look at itself as to whether we're mentally ready, whether our society has gone so far that we have a generation of young men and women, especially men, that if they go into combat right now, there's a question as to whether they're going to survive or not, because there are no stress cards on that battlefield. But that's something else that this whole Marxist movement incorporated, that kind of thing, and I've probably said enough, so anyhow, I don't even remember what you asked me, but...
Well, no, we're going to talk about this issue. I want to, because we're in a cultural crisis of losing our men and our boys. We are feminizing them and taking that gift away from women. We're putting it on men. They don't know their role. We don't have clarified roles. And it has this horrible ripple effect through our entire society. It's a very important topic, but I'm so curious about how that training went, how that 30-day training went for you. And you survived it, and you joined Delta Force. What was that like? Yeah,
this is interesting, I think, because we started with 118 people. 30 days later, we had 19. And I mean, that was the average attrition rate, though. We had 19 people that made it all the way through. But they put you up in the mountains, give you very heavy rucksack, and then before the crack of dawn, they wake you up in the morning. You're sleeping in a tent, out on the side of a mountain somewhere, and they wake you up. They take you to a point on the ground. They say, here's where you are on the map. Now, the next place you need to go is here. Do you have any questions? No? Okay, go. Well, how much time do I have? Just go as fast as you can. Do your very best. They never know the standard. That's a unique thing in the military. You never know the standard, and that's deliberate. Because what we want to see is, we don't want to see people that can just rise to the occasion. We want to see people that can go when the balloon goes up. And if you tell them what the standard is, you haven't done them a real service, because at some point, they're not going to know what the standard is when they get in combat. And so for up in those mountains, day after day after day, and you just see guys dropping out every day, dropping out. A few of them get hurt, but most of them just get to a point where they just can't take it anymore. 30 days is, and then the last day you go 40 miles, and you go 40 miles with about a 70-pound rucksack, a AK-47, and your load-bearing equipment. 40 miles through the mountains, and this is in the winter too, by the way. And I did that in 11 hours and 27 minutes. Yeah, I was
Incredible.
The first one finished.
I believe that.
Well, but that wasn't the end of the selection. I thought I'm a shoo-in. Well, when we got back to Fort Bragg, the psychologist came in. And the psychologist, after he tested me, he said, Captain Boykin, I'm going to recommend against you being part of this new organization. Nobody had ever told us what it was about, what its mission was going to be or anything, but we knew it was something big. We knew it was secret, and we knew it was going to be hazardous. And I said, why? Why are you going to recommend against me? And he said, you're too religious, and you won't fit in here. So I'm going to recommend that you not be made part of this organization. And as I tell people, I was just on the verge of punching him. I honestly was. But then I thought, well, that wouldn't be a very good example for a Christian. So at any rate, they took me anyhow. And actually, when we started launching missions, the commander, before I was the commander would ask me to stand up on a platform and pray for everybody. And then you got this psychologist back there that's telling me I'm too religious. Well, he had never been in combat either. But when you start going into combat, suddenly everybody kind of is a believer, I
would say
Everybody's a believer. And so when it was routine, when we'd launch a mission, I would get up and pray. In fact, it's on the internet. In Iran, when we went into Iran in 1980 to rescue the hostages and you weren't around then, but we went in to rescue the hostages at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, and we launched it out of Wadi Kenya, Egypt, and there's a picture on the internet of me standing up, and all of us wearing beards and civilian clothes. It was Ramadan, and we didn't want to, we wanted, if we had to do an escape and evasion there during Ramadan, we knew that wearing civilian clothes and looking more like an Iranian would be to our advantage, so that's why we're doing it. So, but there's a picture of us, all of us in blue jeans and shirts and beards, and we're all praying. We're praying that God would go with us, that God would keep us safe, that God would bring us home. And then we sang, God Bless America. And we launched. And that became our standard. We prayed. We sang, God Bless America. And we launched. And it's still done today.
Really?
Yeah, it's still done in the unit today.
That's very hopeful.
Yeah.
That gives me hope. How many of you were there at that time when you were rescuing hostages from Iran?
We had, of our people, I think we had probably 75 or 80. We had maybe a dozen Rangers that went with us to kind of be support people. Now that was the one where we went in by fixed wing airplanes into a desert, nothing but desert, about 100 miles from Tehran. We landed, and then we brought in the helicopters off the United States Nimitz, an aircraft carrier, and they pulled in behind the the fixed-wing aircraft, and we rolled hoses out and started refueling. Well, as they were refueling, one of the pilots lifted up to try and move so another plane could get, another helicopter could get in the way. And it was very dark, and there was a lot of sand and dust and all, and he went vertigo. You know, he couldn't hold it. He didn't know which way was up, you know. And he crashed it right on top of the C-130. And I was walking, I was probably the length of this room from it, walking over to it to get a head count. And that's when I realized there's 45 of the Delta Force men inside that burning wreckage.
You're kidding.
What can I do? And I was shielding myself, and the Lord said, you got one place that you can go. Come to me. And I just began to pray, and I wrote a book called The Warrior's Soul. And there's a chapter in there we call the Stu Weber and I. Stu was with Promise Keepers for a long time. He's my battle buddy. He lives out in Portland. But we wrote a chapter called The Power of a 10-Second Prayer. When I realized those men were trapped in that burning wreckage, with all my heart, I said, God, these men trusted you. I ask you to bring them out of this alive in Jesus' name, amen. 10-second prayer. The Pharisees and Sadducees prayed these long, elaborate prayers, didn't they? But who were they praying to? They were praying to the people around them. They were not praying to God. A 10-second prayer that is prayed from the bottom of our heart with passion is far more effective. The fervent and effectual prayer of a righteous man. Well, I am not righteous, but I've had to deal with that too. And the Lord has said, do the best you can. And when you stumble and fall, confess it. And I give him plenty of opportunity to forgive me, you know. But so that was the first time that was really our first major mission. And there were 8 men, none of the Delta Force men that stood in the desert in Wadi Kenya, Egypt, and prayed. None of them were hurt or they got some singed hair. But there were 4 of the men in the Air Force that were killed there. And at that point, everybody was trying to get into the Delta Force. Now, you'd think it would be just the opposite. But keep in mind, this is 1980. Men thought different in 1980. Men came out of the womb meant to be warriors. They wanted to prove themselves. You know, I came in the Army at a time when the Army was in shambles, because we were just coming out of Vietnam, racial problems, we had drug problems, we had all kinds of things going on in our military, and people no longer wanted to be in the military. And then we turned that around, and I thought that we built a great volunteer army. When I left the military in 2007, I was so happy and pleased that we were back. We were back. We were ready. You could count on us. We were going to, and it wasn't just the materiel they had and the skills they had and all that. It was the fact that they understood what their job was. In 1962, Douglas MacArthur stood in the mess hall at West Point and looked at all those cadets there in that mess hall, and he said, your mission means the missions of the Army. Your mission remains fixed, determined, inviolable. It is to win the nation's wars. That has not changed. But you wouldn't know that by the way our military has been acting and the kinds of things that Biden and his cohorts, especially this guy C.Q. Brown, it was a terrible selection, but he wasn't there because he was a war fighter. Sure. I'm sorry, I've gone on a little too long.
No, I want you to. Yeah. I want you to tell us everything that you want to tell us. It's fascinating, the history of what you have been through. I mean, you participated in, heroically, one of our nation's, if not our nation's most intense and historic hostage rescue. It's just remarkable. I want to hear all the stories. I want to hear your scariest moment, your most intense moment. I want all of that's captured up in there for my audience to hear, because you're exactly right. We have this mentality now that men being men is toxic, right? We have toxic masculinity, and there's something wrong with being masculine and being manly. And then you have all your women over here just desperate to find a man with a shred of masculinity, because that's what we're built to desire. And we're so skewed, we're so off track now. So you're absolutely right, and I'm so grateful to hear your perspective on this, but also have 1,000 questions about your time in Delta Force.
Well, I will tell you, I've been wounded twice. And the first time I was wounded was when we invaded Grenada, the little Caribbean island. And I got hit in the side of my chest and then up through my armpit. Some of it came out the top, most of it stayed in the shoulder and the side of my body here. And I was bleeding really bad, and I was hurting really bad too, but I just, all I could think of was, God, are you going to leave me here? Is this where I'm going to die? Have you abandoned me? Have you abandoned me? They carried me out to a helicopter, to a medevac. And they were going to take me over to a ship where they could operate on me. And as I was coming in and out, I was in and out, on the stretcher. And finally I looked up, and the pilot leaned out the window and he was giving me a thumbs up. I thought, that's very thoughtful of him. And then I looked at him again. It was a guy I grew up with.
Wow. And you didn't know
he was a Marine.
Was flying you.
I was Army.
Huh.
He shouldn't have been on that helicopter. He was the executive officer of the whole squadron, but when they called for a medevac, you medevac, who can fly it? Who can fly it? We got to expect it, which means they think you're going to die. And I'd heard all this. And he asked his maintenance chief, he said, do we have anything left? The chief said, no. He said, nothing? He said, well, we got the old hangar queen back here, but she's in maintenance. And he said, will it fly? He said, well, yeah, it'll fly, but you're going to get in a lot of trouble. If you fly that thing, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. He said, I don't care. There's a man that needs a medevac. There's a man that might die. He said, you sit in the co-pilot seat, I'll fly it. They fired it up. He took off. And when he got in and landed and he saw them bringing me out, he knew it was the hand of God. That he was there at that time to come and pick me up and save my life. Now, why do I choose that story to tell you? I choose that story to tell you because we never know what God's intentions are. That was a bad injury, and it took me a long time to recover, but I did. And I used to take my wife to the gym on my birthday and load up 300 pounds, and I'd bench press 300 pounds just to impress her, and she'd squeal with glee. But we don't understand everything. And from my perspective, we just need to trust the Lord. And I will tell you, I've seen a lot of things happen that cannot be anything other than the hand of God. And the second time I was wounded, as a matter of fact, I was with two other guys. And a mortar hit not more than 8 or 10 feet from us. And they were between me and the mortar. And it killed one of them. And it shot the other one. It tore his legs up. The mortar just chewed his legs up. And it hit my legs as well. But I finally got to my feet, and I said to the Lord, I said, why did you take him? Why didn't you take me? My children are all grown. Why didn't you take me instead of him? Well, when I got to the Family Research Council many years later, I was still asking God that question, but I never told anybody. Never told my wife, my pastor. On the 15th of August, 2012, a guy walked in our lobby with a pistol in his hand and shot Leo Johnson. He told the judge that he was going to kill as many of us as possible, right? And that was when the Lord spoke to me in what was clearly a strong message. When I was saying, why did you spare me and not him? And the Lord said, I spared you to fight another day. And this is the war. This is the war that I spared you to fight. It's the culture war in America, which bleeds over into a very nasty physical combat sometimes. And what's important is that we as men need to understand that America depends upon us for us to do what we've been called to do as men, and that is to lead, to protect. I mean, one of my latest books is a book for men. I tell them 5 things that they're supposed to be, and I give them the scriptural basis for it all, but men are walking away from those things. And we can't have a military if we don't have warriors, and you can't have warriors if you got men that today are 50% less testosterone than 40 years ago. Can you believe that?
We're regressing.
On average.
Evolutionarily regressing.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
50%.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had not heard the statistic. I had heard that the levels were lower, but that's actually really, really shocking.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell you, my dad's generation, you know, I told you he was the only one that was wounded of the 5 brothers. But he came back, went back to the farm, and married my mother and started raising children. He never asked for anything, and he was totally blind in his left eye, and he had a pension, a disability, but he used the money from that to build a house for his mother and father, who were farmers, itinerant farmers, and they never had a house of their own. And he bought them. He built them a house with his pension. And
that's the example, isn't it?
I got to tell you,
beautiful.
Everything, every value that I have, everything that I believe came from my parents. My mother was a saint. My dad was a man's man. And where are those mentors today? Who's training this situation? I mean, this part of our society. Who's training this generation? Who's mentoring them? Who's showing them the way? Who's helping them to understand? You have a younger audience than I do when I'm talking to people and so forth most of the time. But it's not hard for them to understand. It's not hard for them to understand that there was a time in America when men were men. And I'm not in any way saying that men need to go around proving themselves, but I am saying in their own mind they need to be ready. And it's the natural thing for a man in my age, especially in my year groups, to want to prove himself. Because his father, his uncle, his buddies, they've all been there, and he wants to prove himself like that too.
Yeah.
As a warrior.
I sure hope we can get back there. Even just when you compare the 2 presidential administrations, Joe Biden and the kind of man and leader he was, and now President Trump, even so much more so than his first time in the White House. An example of leadership, of strength, of masculinity, but also how he wants to see the country come back and harken back to this time that you're talking about, where we were creating, we were producers, we worked hard, followed the law, respected each other, had families, had babies, stayed committed. We're really off track on a lot of it. And I think that you have really hit the nail on the head about needing to train up our men differently than the influences that they have had recently, because they are just completely shrinking away and removing themselves from participating in society. Because why would they? They're not fulfilling who God meant them to be in any way. And so the only thing they know to do is just remove themselves from it. And we know where that lands us eventually. Certain generations down the line, we won't have much left. So what do you think, General, about the changes happening to our military now since Trump has been inaugurated here? He's removing transgender members, restoring members of the military who had been pushed out or fired for refusing to take the COVID vaccine. He is trying to implement some changes to re-strengthen and get the military back on its feet. But of course that's going to take time, right? What do you think about that?
I think in the next 4 years you won't recognize our military. I think they're going to do everything that is needed, and they're going to be fighting all the way. They're going to have the liberals, the Marxists, the socialists, it's all one and the same, and they are going to fight Trump every step of the way. But now that he's the president, people are saying, well, yeah, I thought it was stupid, some of the stuff that was going on, but I didn't want to be the only one, you know. And now people are coming out saying, yeah, that was stupid. I mean, men playing in women's teams, how stupid can you be? Really, I think that all of that stuff is disappearing right now, as you said. It's all being taken care of. And remember this. When Trump was in office the first time, he also banned transgenders. Mm-hmm. But he had to fight his own Secretary of Defense to be able to do it. Because Mad Dog Madison, Mad Dog by foot. Mad Dog Madison wanted to let them continue to serve. Well, if you're on in the Congress, if you're anywhere that you're influencing the decisions that have to be made with regards to military readiness, you need to ask yourself one question first of all. Does this decision in any way make our military more capable of fighting and winning the nation's wars? Do you think DEI did that? Nobody with a brain did. Nobody with a brain. This was not what it was about. If you ever look at, I don't know if you've ever even looked at some of the recruiting posters that they came out with, right. Some of the videos and all, and it was all about the LGBT agenda. Mm-hmm. Now, what man is going to run down to the recruiting office and say, hey, I want to be part of that. I want to know my pronouns too. It's foolishness. It's insanity. And as far as I'm concerned, it's actually demonic. Because it is one of those things where we can let things happen that we know are not good for us, not good for the nation. It's going to hinder us as a nation in terms of our development of our men and women. But nobody says anything. Nobody's trying to stop it. And those who are getting hammered.
Yeah.
Let's get back to sanity.
Yeah. In my conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Tommy Waller, and you know Tommy, we talked about something that you don't hear about that often, which is our financial investment we make in every soldier in our Army. And when you think about it that way, this is an investment that we are making in our national security.
That's right.
The human investment that we're making to train and prepare and for them to do this work. And it seems that has not only been forgotten, but we're forgetting that we should have, talking about those standards, right? The standard for your Delta Force training and the reasoning why that wasn't set, and almost as a limiting governor. But there should be some basic standards to meet for physical and mental and emotional health for people going into the Army. And with the introduction of first people who are gay and then these transgendered people who are on so much medication, so much physical, mental, emotionally altering medication, and then just to waive that barrier, it seemed to completely miss the mark and the point of the whole purpose of building an army. Do you think you say we're going to have a new, we won't recognize the Army in this, or the military in this next 4 years, and I really hope you're right. I think the concern is that enough time to get this turned around?
No is the answer, but here's why. I guess the thing that will take the longest is restoring the leadership. Mm-hmm. Right now, they need to go in and clean house. They need to get rid of people. Everybody knows who got their star or their second star or whatever, that they got it because they're woke. Everybody knows who those people are. Get rid of them right now. Get rid of them and bring up some new new blood, some people that you can identify unequivocally as warriors, that they've demonstrated that they're warriors, and put them in there. That's the hardest part. And of course, you get all kinds of lawsuits and everything.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But look, you serve in our military. First of all, there's nothing that says that you have to serve, but there's nothing that says that if you serve, you have a lifetime guarantee that you're going to continue doing that. You'll do it as long as you're performing and meeting the standards. Now, I would challenge you. I can take you to the pharmacy at Fort Myer, which is right next to Arlington Cemetery. I just came from there at a funeral. You can go there and sit down in that pharmacy, and you will see soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that are so fat that you wonder how they make uniforms big enough for them. And I'm saying, where are the standards today? Well, if I let myself go, I could be a little fat boy. I had to work hard not to be a fat boy. But it doesn't matter anymore. And that goes back to military readiness. Mm-hmm. How can you be ready to fight if you don't have the stamina? I mean, I'm not talking about just in the infantry. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about on a ship. You know, when you're overweight, you wear down. You wear down a whole lot quicker than somebody that's physically fit. And you go over and sit in that lobby and look at the people coming in there, and you say to yourself, this is disgusting. Mm. Who's letting you do that? Who's letting you get by with that? And the answer is the leaders. Mm-hmm. The leaders, they haven't cleaned it up. That's why Pete Hegseth has got to get rid of some of these bad actors mm-hmm. that don't belong in the military now. They've done, their time has come and gone. Now move them out and get some that really care, because what happens when you got people like Joe Biden and Barack Obama, and they're picking people because they're woke, because they are going to support their agenda. What people don't think about is, as a result of that, there's somebody out there that tells it's time for you to go home because they're not going to get the star. They're not going to get the rank, the promotion. So they're going to let these people go. People that, many of which are going to be solid warriors. In the place of them, they will get these people that are there for one reason only. And it's disgusting and disappointing to me that. Matter of fact, somebody asked me if I wanted to be in the administration, and I said no, not at this point in my life. I'll do anything I can to help you, but I said, but I tell you what, I would do. You know that board that's been talked about throwing some of these guys out? Yeah, I'd help you with that. Yeah, you call me, I'll be there the next morning.
They'd be very wise to have you on that, because it doesn't just put America at risk or American citizens at risk. It's putting your fellow military brother or sister at risk when you can't defend them, when you go into any kind of scenario. And as we know, America fights for the rest of the world. So it's really, it starts right here. And so I do hope that we can get it turned around. And I want to ask you one more thing while I've got you. I know I'm asking you all the questions. But I want to roll this into a security and defense question. Because, yes, we're getting into this next Trump administration, and things seem to be moving toward a place of peace and more stabilization on the global stage. There are many who believe that we really dodged a bullet during particularly the last year of the Biden administration from China, in the sense that they were really primed and ready to attack us. And of course, knowing the state of our military and how weak it was, how vulnerable we were. So those people believe we're not out of the woods yet. There's a lot of negotiating going on about trying to calm things down globally. What do you think, with your great perspective across all of these years and decades in the military, do a little forecasting for us. What do you think is going to be able to be accomplished with regard to international conflicts and really world peace during these next 4 years?
Yeah, I think, let's just take the two obvious, Ukraine and Israel. You know, those are the headliners right now. I think that I think we're going to see the Ukrainian situation ultimately result in a ceasefire. Now, Zelensky is not going to like it, and he's going to whine, but Trump holds the cards on this, you know. And let me just say what I said to you off camera. I think what has to happen is, for the Ukrainians, is the Europeans need to step up and put a greater percentage of their GDP, which is what we're doing. We're carrying the ball on this, and this is on their continent. Now, I'm all for, you know, doing everything we can to help, you know, there's a limit on everything, and I think there's got to be a limit on how much we're willing to spend when the Europeans are sitting back using theirs for their own woke programs, their own socialism, their own form of socialism, you know. So I think we'll see that come to an end, but it's going to be a tense ceasefire, and it will be violated. And I think with Israel, now bear with me on this, because I'm about to say something that you may want to not air, but when Joshua led the Israelites across the river, right before he went across that river, God said to him, when you get over there, kill them all. Kill their wives and children, kill their animal, or they will corrupt you. Kill them all. And Joshua didn't do it. Now, when Netanyahu, at the very beginning, said, we've got to annihilate them, or we're going to be right back in this same situation. 1,200 people were killed right there in the first 2 days. I'm not advocating that we kill them all, but what I am advocating is that we move them out of Gaza. We relocate them. And some of these countries, Egypt is obviously one of them. Turkey is another one. Some of these governments that are talking about how the people are not being treated fairly if they're Palestinians. Well, you can make it fair. Why don't you take them? Why don't you take them? Because you don't know the history. You don't know the history of Israel. You don't know that 1947, the League of Nations gave that land to the Israelis. They were not Israelis at that time. They were actually Palestinians. But the League of Nations gave them that. And the day after, the League of Nations said when they reach a certain percentage or a certain number of people in their population, they can declare sovereignty. The next day, the Jordanians attacked them. And the Jordanians attacked them every day from that point on until they declared sovereignty. Well, I think, quite frankly, that they're going to have to do something with Gaza, and it cannot be anything that resembles what it used to be. When they pulled out of there years ago, and their prime minister at that time was a war hero, when they pulled out, it was for peace. You cannot trade land for peace. It doesn't work, and it has never worked in that part of the world. Never worked. So I think we're going to see a new Gaza, a different Gaza, and it's going to take time to do it. But I don't think that they're going to let it be semi-autonomous the way it has been in the past, simply because they lost 1,200 people in the first 2 days. And they've lost more since then. And they've got hostages out there. And these people are out there dancing in the streets when they're giving the hostages back. They're demonic. These people are demonic. But Netanyahu was right. You know, we got to clear them out of here, and then whatever we bring back or whatever we allow to be here, they've got to be under some kind of close watch and control.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective. We have not experienced war really in our lifetime, sort of in the Middle East, but our culture now has no tolerance and no stomach for it and what needs to be done to ensure it doesn't happen again. And that's a luxury, right? It's a luxury to try to find the ideal scenario and hope for the best and spare every life and make sure everyone's happy. It isn't realistic. So I think culturally we have to get onto this understanding, which is the only realistic option, which is those people who want to terrorize and kill and steal have to be removed. Otherwise, you're right, it will continue to happen again. So I think it's a mindset shift that we have to have as a nation. And I hope that people like you with this wisdom and experience continue speaking to that issue and helping us understand why that is the right way forward. So I'm grateful for it. I'm so grateful for your time today. I know we could continue the conversation for hours and hours, and there's so much more I still want to ask you. But I hope that we can sit down again in the near future and continue to hear your stories, about your life, about your experience, about how you have so courageously and selflessly served our country and our citizens. And on behalf of this nation, we love you and we're thankful for you. You are a hero and a gift, and appreciate the work that you're doing to share about Jesus. We sure need it right now, don't we? We need a lot of Jesus.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I'm really not a hero, but my mission at this point, and whatever amount of time I have left, my mission is to spread the gospel and to support this country any way I can. I love America, and that's the part of the problem today. We stopped teaching American history, and we started teaching this I don't know if you can call it history or what, but it's not American history. It's not true American history. And therefore, we've got a generation, many of which hate America, because that's all they've been filled with that. So thank you. Thank you very much. And let's do all we can to change this opinion that some of these people have of America today, because we're not perfect.
Yeah, amen.
But we're still better than anything else.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir,
Thank
for all
you.
of it.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
You too. Oh, and thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic. We're committed to breaking down the basics so that you get to decide. Be sure to check us out at politicallybasic.com and follow us at Politically Basic so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you next time.